Have you ever asked yourself, who is my neighbor? One of the most famous quotes that I think crosses country lines, continental lines, every culture, every language comes from that verse, love your neighbor as yourself. Whether you're Christian or not Christian, you know this verse. You may not realize it's in the Bible, but it's there. And that's where it comes from. Jesus was asked a question, and the question was, what is the greatest commandment? And we all know the response. He said, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your mind, with all your soul. And the second is like it, love your neighbor as yourself. The second part of that response is one of the most popular phrases on the globe. And for thousands of years, the concept of loving our neighbor as ourselves is so intrinsic to us as humans because we are all born to love and be loved. So it doesn't surprise me that it's such a popular quote to say. But we don't often stop and ask ourselves what things mean. Really think it through. So one of the questions I asked was, who is our neighbor, biblically speaking? Because my neighbor, that as we know in terms of, where we live, a lot of my fellow Christian believers aren't my neighbors, but I know I'm supposed to love them. So, okay, so they're not my neighbors. And my family, they don't all live next to me, but I'm supposed to love them, or I think I am. So what is this neighbor business? Who is my neighbor? So that led me to looking in the scriptures. And a lot of times we will find things defined right in the scripture. And it's actually my favorite because we can take a word and define it, use a few words to define a word. And, that's our Western way of thinking. But Jesus tended to define things using stories. Now, before we go and talk about the Good Samaritan, I actually took a little bit of a detour today where I talked about philosophy versus theology. Because we tend to look at things through this thought process, even on the things we believe, that actually were born from philosophy and not theology. And the reason I do that is because even the words that we have defined and the way that we look at things aren't always based on the scriptures, but are based on an underlying belief that came from philosophy and not theology. In the book, I define both. Basically, philosophy is logic things that we determine using our human logic, a thought process. We talk about existence in the world and the meaning of things through our human logic. Theology is simply the study of the nature of God. And the reason it's important is because our logic, right, the human mind has its limits, but God is unlimited and he created all things. So whenever you go and look at things about philosophy or theology, you're going to notice that in mainstream Christianity, you have philosophy and theology underneath. And that's really the wrong order because what you're saying is, here's what I've concluded with my logical mind. Here's the nature of God and what I've learned of the nature of God. And I'm trying to, in the mind, the logic of the mind is above this. And then I'm trying to take what I know about God and bring it up to philosophy. But really, it should be theology up top and philosophy at the bottom. Why? God created all things. He knows how things are designed and how things are to work. And we are created in his image and his likeness. So we should measure ourselves to him, right? So our minds are important, I am a thinker. I love to learn, and I am probably one of the most logical people that you know. Okay. It's even how I approach studying. However, everything that I learn with my mind must submit to my knowledge of God. And this is why the knowledge of God, the knowledge of God's nature must be there. It's our baseline for life, it's our foundation for life. And then when I learn things with my mind, right, and I conclude things that may be accurate, I must always submit it to who God is and to God's nature. And that's how I know, that's wisdom right there. Okay. So it's very important. So when I add the question, who is my neighbor? I saw that Jesus answered that very question, and in two different stories. Now, the world says that we should love those who love us, and we need to be kind, and we need to respect those who respect us, yada, yada, right? Jesus said, love your enemies. Jesus said, those who persecute you, you should pray for them, not about them, not that they change, but pray for them. Pray on behalf of them, which basically means pray out of love. Because when you love someone, you want what's best for them. You don't want them to be destroyed. So the encouragement today is this. Everyone that you encounter is your neighbor. Everyone is deserving of your love. That doesn't mean that you have an intimate relationship with them. It doesn't mean if you had an issue and you forgave them, or you had a situation. It does not mean that you have to be their best friend. It does not mean that you have reconciled with them. It means that you love them. You don't desire ill for them. You want what's best for them. You want them to have God. You want them to have the best of everything. Okay? That is love. So I encourage you to ask the question today. Is there someone that you consider an enemy? There have been those who say that we shouldn't have enemies. I am of the opinion that if Jesus said we should love our enemies, that's because we have enemies. So do you have an enemy? And if so, do you love them? If your answer is no, or you haven't loved them, that's okay. Take that to God. Take it to God and tell God, God, I know that I'm supposed to love my enemies, but it's so hard. Can you show me how to love that person? Empower me to love them as you love, so that I can live out your love. It's not always going to be easy, but one thing I know is that God will show you. And if you truly desire to love as he loves, he will show you how, and your heart will start to change. So I encourage you today to take that step and ask yourself, who can I love better? How can I love them better? And if it hurts too much, I want you to remember one thing. We already talked about forgiveness. Jesus was on the cross, and while he was being killed, he forgave them, and he asked God to forgive them as well. So I say that to encourage you to forgive as he forgives, and loving as he loves. That may be a little bit harder, or maybe you don't know what that looks like in that situation. Ask God. He'll show you. But if you need to talk it out, I'm always here. You guys know that you can reach out to me. Have a wonderful day, guys, and we will see each other tomorrow.